Netflix's live-action remake of Avatar the Last Airbender is set to drop here soon on February 22nd. It's already got the internet pretty divided. Some people are very excited to see it, others not so much. But one thing we can all agree on is that it won't have that love that was present in the original Avatar the Last Airbender series. And that's exactly what this video is for. I want to pay homage to my boy Aang. How strong is Aang? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out today. I've analyzed the data. I've got some values to present to you, and without further ado, let's jump right into it in my favorite section, the strength section. Now, finding Aang's strength is actually very difficult because he's a pacifist in nature. He will do his best to avoid conflict, and even when he is in conflict, he won't exert himself to his fullest extent. But to get around this, we can find another avatar who presented the most strength we've ever seen in the entire series, named Kyoshi. You might be wondering, why are we using Kyoshi to find Aang's strength? Well, it's because Aang is an avatar, and avatars have this state called the avatar state, and within that state they have all the skill and the wisdom of all the previous avatars that came before them. In this case, Kyoshi is also included. This is shown very explicitly because even before Aang learned how to do bending of certain elements, he was able to bend those elements even when he activated the avatar state, even without him knowing how to bend that element. So with that explanation in mind, let's get to analyzing the strongest feat we've seen from the previous avatars, and that being Kyoshi. So Kyoshi actually had to create an island. Kyoshi Island, that was in the entire series, was created by Kyoshi herself because her people were going to be invaded by another group, and she just cut off a piece of the mainland and moved it into the ocean. And that obviously takes quite a bit of force. So we need to find out how much force and how much energy she had to use to create that island. It's really hard to actually find out this value because to find out force, we need the mass and we need the acceleration. So let's start off with the easier one, mass. Or the harder one, sorry. Mass was a little bit harder because we don't actually know the mass of the island. So we need to find the mass in a different way by first finding the volume. Now, finding the volume itself is hard because there's no average volume for islands. So let's break the volume into two separate components, being area and height. These two are a little bit easier to find for islands. Unfortunately, there's not an average area for an island because there are so many islands and they come in so many different varieties. So we have to find the area in a more creative way. In this case, I had to find out how poor I was because I had to go look on a website where people actually buy private islands. And I just tabulated up all the areas of all the islands that were for sale. Some of them were as small as 10 acres, other as big as 1,000 acres. But after taking the averages of all those areas, I found out that the average area of an island for sale was about 100 acres. So we're going to use that value for the area of the island. Now to find out the height of the island, this one's a bit of an assumption because we actually can't see how big of a chunk that the island is in terms of its depth into the ocean. So we're just going to assume a nice healthy value of 1 kilometer or 1,000 meters. So with our 100 acres, we can convert that to meters squared, which is a little over 400,000 meters squared. Multiply that by the height, which is 1,000 meters, and we get a volume of a little over 400 million meters cubed. Now to find the mass, all we have to do is multiply it by the density. This one's a bit tricky too because islands and the ground isn't particularly made of one material. It's made of a combination of materials. But we are going to use granite because granite is one of the most prevalent materials in the crust of the earth. And we're going to use a lower bound for it. And it's about 2,630 kilograms per meters cubed. Multiply that by the volume we got earlier, and we get a mass of the island to be 1.06 times 10 to the power of 12 kilograms of mass. That is impressive. Now we need to find out how much it was accelerating. Unfortunately for us, we don't know its acceleration, nor the speed that it moved at. So we're going to have to make an assumption here and say that Kyoshi was moving the island at about the average speed limit of a highway in the US, which is about 70 miles per hour. That equates to 31.3 meters per second. Analyzing the video, I timed it with a stopwatch, and it went from standstill to its 70 miles per hour in about 5 seconds. So, assuming a linear acceleration, dividing the velocity by the time gives us an average acceleration of 6.26 meters per second square. Finally, we can now find the force by multiplying the mass we have by the acceleration we have, and we get a final force value of 6.663 times 10 to the power of 12 newtons. Last thing we have to find now is energy. This one's pretty simple. E equals force times distance. Now, the distance also had to be assumed, but we did assume a good distance of 10 kilometers because she did want to avoid her village being raided by invaders. So 10 kilometers is a pretty healthy assumption. So the force we got earlier multiplied by 10,000 meters gives us an energy of 6.663 times 10 to the power of 16 joules. So Aang, being in the Avatar state, should be able to also reach these types of forces and energy. There's a couple notes we have to make. We're not going to find Aang's punching strength or his normal strength because unlike we did in like the Gojo or Sukuna videos, because benders in the series Avatar the Last Airbender either strictly fight with bending or bending is heavily prioritized in their combat. So we don't really have to find out how hard he can punch. Doesn't really matter because they're benders. Second thing we're going to assume is that this energy and force is equivalent through all his bending styles. So it's not like they might vary a bit, but there's no drastic variation through the different bending styles. And that's the strength section. A lot of assumptions, but pretty good. He's a heavy hitter, even in what we most shonen series. He's a pretty tough cookie. Next, we're going to get to the speed. Speed is not that hard to find. It's because we can thank the firebenders for this. So high-level firebenders, such like Ozai and Azula, can use lightning attacks. They can shoot lightning. And characters like Aang, Iroh, Zuko have a technique to counter this called lightning redirection, where they catch the lightning bolt with their fingers, redirect it to their stomach, and out the other hand. Obviously, in order to do this, you need to be able to catch that lightning bolt within your fingers. If we assume that the lightning these firebenders create is equivalent to that of natural lightning, we can assume the velocity of these lightnings to be that equivalent to the liter of a real-world lightning bolt. In this case, the lightning liter is about 200,000 miles per hour. That equates to about a little over 89,000 meters per second. So that would be about where Aang and anyone who can catch lightning in the series would fall under. Their movement and reaction speed should be about 89,000 meters per second. That being said, it doesn't quite equate to their running speed like we did in the Gojo and Sukuna video, because we have seen Aang run and there's been no evidence that they can run that fast. The fastest we've actually seen Aang run is when he runs on water to escape a giant predator fish. Luckily for us, we don't have to do this math because some people way smarter than me already did it, and they found the speed for a human needed to be able to run on water to be about 70 miles per hour or 31.3 meters per second. So that's the speed section. Very straightforward. The acceleration, though, not so much. We have to be a little bit more creative with this one. So the scene I'm going to use specifically is when Aang was fighting Ozai in his final battle, and Ozai actually did shoot a lightning bolt at Aang, and he did catch that lightning bolt. So now we have to find out how fast he had to accelerate by lifting his hand to catch that lightning bolt. Fortunately for us, we can see the lightning bolt come into frame when Aang lands and has to start moving his hand to catch it. We're going to assume the lightning bolt is 5 meters away from Aang when he has to start moving his hand. We know how fast the lightning is going because we're assuming a natural lightning bolt, which means we can find the total time Aang has to react to catch this lightning bolt. To find that, we can divide the distance of 5 meters by 89,000 meters per second, and it gets a total time of 5.59 times 10 to the negative 5 seconds. We need to half that time because we're going to assume that it's a linear acceleration, and he has to accelerate his hand to the halfway point and then decelerate his hand to the lightning bolt so that his hand stops and catches it. So dividing that total time by 2, we get a time of 2.8 times 10 to the negative 5 seconds. Next, we need to find out the distance his arm had to move. Fortunately for us, he moves it in an arc radius. In this case, from like the bottom of the ground to, we'll assume, a parallel plane. So that's about a quarter of a circle, or pi over 2 radians. Multiply that by the average length of a male arm, which is about 76 centimeters or 0.76 meters, and we get a total distance of 1.19 meters. Of course, we're only doing the math to the halfway point, so divide that by 2, and he has to move the distance of 0.595 meters. Now we can find the average velocity because we know the distance divided by the time, and we get an average velocity of 21,250 meters per second. But that's not really what we want to find. We want to find the final velocity and the initial velocity. Fortunately for us, we're going to assume the v initial is at a standstill, so 0 meters per second, and we can use this lovely average formula to rearrange the formula to solve for vf. And once we do that, we get a final velocity of 42,500 meters per second. Which means the last thing we have to do now is take the v final minus v initial, which v initial 0, so v final divided by the time, and so we get an acceleration of 1.5 times 10 to the power of 9 meters per second squared. This acceleration is absolutely insane. It's crazy insane. To put it into perspective, if Aang didn't have like a speed limit, like if he could just move as fast as he could and like break the laws of physics and move faster than light and all that stuff, if he was to stand still and then start moving in 1 second with that acceleration, in 1 second, he could be 5 times faster than the speed of light. It's an insane acceleration. Obviously, this acceleration only applies to his movement because he can't run that fast, so we can't apply that acceleration to him. So we have to run a separate calculation to find his running acceleration. This one was a bit harder, and for a funny reason. It's because the scene where he was running on water was presented a bit comically. So like he jumps into the air and his legs start running like it's a cartoon, and then he begins moving. Timing it was weird. We could take his 31.3 meters per second divided by the time it takes for him to reach that speed. Timing it, like I said, was difficult. I got about 0.7 seconds. If I didn't know like when to start and stop it. I got 0.7 seconds, but we'll round it up to 1 second just for safety, and we'll say that his acceleration is 31.3 meters per second squared. And last but not least is the durability section, and this one's a bit difficult for Aang because he gets hit very rarely in the show. He generally avoids everything, and for the few times he almost gets hit, he generally puts a barrier around himself, whether it be with air or rock or water or whatever, to not take damage. So if you really want to be nitpicky, his durability should be as strong as his strength section, because he can create a barrier around himself and keep himself safe from whatever attack. But if we're looking at it, basically, if you were just to catch him off guard and hit him as hard as you can, how hard would you have to hit him for them to take damage? While they are still impressive in that scenario, in comparison to like real life humans, they still fall a little bit short in comparison to like fictional characters, because they're afraid of arrows being shot at them. That being said, they are still very strong. They've been hit by rocks. They've fallen like plenty of stories and been fine. But I think the most impressive thing is when Azula actually shot Aang in the spine with a lightning bolt. Obviously, that was getting struck by lightning fucking sucks. You can see that it left a burn mark. It was right in the center of his spine. It left a burn mark and left him unconscious for, I forgot how long. He was unconscious for a little while. And those symptoms are actually very common for people who get struck by lightning. There's burning. In real life, even after you recover, most people actually do survive getting struck by lightning, but they have like lifelong consequences because of it. The burning, actually, because lightning has 7 gigajoules of energy within it, and it can reach temperatures of close to 28,000 degrees Celsius. It leaves a lot of burning, it leaves vaporization that like a vaporization that happens like in your lungs. It leads to like burning in your lungs, and muscle spasm and seizures that occur throughout like the rest of your life. So the fact that Aang was able to get struck by lightning, have these like common symptoms of having the burn mark and being unconscious, but then waking up and like basically living out his life very normally, is very impressive and shows just how strong Aang is. But other than that, that's all I really have to say. That's everything. We've had the strength, the speed, the acceleration, and the durability. Last thing we can touch on is maybe his weaknesses, because Aang does have some very prominent weaknesses. The first being that he's a kid. He doesn't have the maturity or wisdom that he does when he's in the Avatar state. When he's in the Avatar state, he's very wise and very mature because he has all those past lives like within him. But when he's not in the Avatar state, he definitely falls short in those regards. The second thing, and arguably the even bigger one, is that he's a pacifist. He will not kill. Even in his fight with Ozai, like the monster of the show, he would not have killed Ozai. If he didn't know how to spirit bend, it was basically over for the world, because Aang would not have killed him. But other than that, Aang is a fucking badass, and I hope I've convinced you of that today. Other than that, that's all I have to say. Peace out, and I hope you have a good day.